Why does the history of a 16th century global empire hold the key to understanding the precarious financial future of the modern world? Could the most sophisticated financial architecture in human history be inadvertently replicating the very mechanisms that dismantled the world's first global empire? As the United States navigates a fiscal landscape where interest payments on sovereign debt have begun to eclipse the entire national defense budget, the historical parallels to 16th century Spain transition from academic curiosity to strategic warning. How can a modern hegemon, equipped with the tools of digital finance and global reserve currency status, find itself ensnared in the same imperial overstretch that bankrupted the Habsburg dynasty, despite their monopoly on New World silver? How did the financial fragility of an empire that commanded the Atlantic manifest itself through a reliance on short-term credit instruments that effectively mortgaged the future of the crown? The reign of Philip II was defined by a structural dependence on asientos, short-term high-interest loans provided by Genoese and German banking houses to fund the relentless demands of imperial warfare. While these instruments provided immediate liquidity, they created a paradoxical dependency. The more silver Spain extracted from the Americas, the more it relied on credit to bridge the temporal gap between extraction and expenditure. Is it not a profound logical paradox that the possession of the world's primary monetary metal, silver, led not to financial independence, but to a permanent state of indebtedness to foreign financiers? What were the systemic consequences when the Spanish crown, facing a collapse of its credit-to-silver ratio, issued the catastrophic decree of September 1, 1575? The 1575 decree of suspension of payments was not merely a financial adjustment. It was a sovereign default that froze the credit markets of Castile and sent shockwaves through the fairs of Lyon and Antwerp. This decree reveals a fundamental structural contradiction. The king claimed absolute power over his subjects' property, yet his very ability to exercise that power was entirely contingent upon the voluntary participation of international lenders. Was this default not a desperate attempt to regain sovereignty that ultimately proved the crown was no longer the master of its own fiscal destiny? How did the insights of the School of Salamanca, particularly the observations of Martín de Azpilcueta, expose the self-defeating nature of the empire's monetary expansion? Azpilcueta's formulation of the quantity theory of money was a direct response to the price revolution, where the influx of American bullion led to a massive devaluation of the currency's purchasing power. He identified a structural paradox that remains relevant. An empire can be rich in currency while its citizens become increasingly poor in goods, as the abundance of money simply drives up the cost of living. Does this historical inflation not mirror the modern dilemma, where massive liquidity injections by the Federal Reserve risk eroding the very economic stability they were designed to protect? In what way did Juan de Mariana, in his treatise De Monetae Mutatione, identify the alteration of currency as a form of hidden taxation that violated the social contract? Mariana's 1609 critique of the debasement of the Veillon
copper coinage, was a radical academic autopsy of how the state uses monetary manipulation to fund its debts without explicit consent. He argued that when a king alters the value of money, he is effectively stealing from his subjects, creating a paradox where the protector of the law becomes its primary violator to service imperial debt. Is this not the exact mechanism of modern financial repression, where inflation and low interest rates are used to subtly transfer wealth from savers to the state to manage national obligations?
What are the implications of the sovereign debt trap when an empire becomes so indebted that its entire strategic focus shifts from expansion to mere interest servicing? By the late 16th century, the Spanish crown was spending over 2/3 of its annual revenue just to service the interest on its juros, long-term bonds, and asientos. This created a terminal structural contradiction. The empire needed to borrow to maintain its power, but the cost of that borrowing eventually paralyzed its ability to act, leading to a state of debt-induced inertia. Does this not parallel the current U.S. fiscal trajectory, where the rising cost of servicing $34 trillion in debt threatens to crowd out all other national priorities, from infrastructure to innovation?
The synthesis. Granular comparative analysis. How do the technical variables of stability in the 16th century juros system compare to the modern issuance of U.S. Treasury bonds in a globalized financial market?
The juros were essentially the world's first widely traded sovereign bonds, providing a fixed income stream backed by royal revenues, much like modern treasuries are backed by the full faith and credit of the United States. However, both systems share a critical vulnerability. They rely on monetary elasticity, the ability to expand the money supply or debt load indefinitely, which eventually hits a wall of physical or economic reality. Is the modern U.S. dollar's status as a reserve currency not a form of digital silver, providing a temporary shield against the same fiscal laws that eventually dismantled the Spanish hegemony? What are the granular contradictions in the use of seigniorage between a metal-based empire and a fiat-based superpower when facing systemic insolvency? While Spain used the physical debasement of coins, the modern state uses the digital expansion of the balance sheet. Yet the technical outcome of seignoraggio remains the same: the extraction of value from the currency holder to the currency issuer. The structural contradiction lies in the fact that this free lunch for the state eventually destroys the trust required for the currency to function as a global medium of exchange. Are we not witnessing a technical mirror of the 17th century Spanish decline, where the loss of confidence in the currency preceded the loss of geopolitical status? Conclusion. How then are we to interpret the persistence of these historical mechanisms in the contemporary context without succumbing to the allure of facile analogies or catastrophic predictions? The narrative of Imperial Spain's debt is not a condemnation, but a profound cautionary tale that reveals the cyclical nature of power, contradictions, and financial stability challenges. The critical question is whether the United States will recognize the warning signs and assimilate the lessons from a past that remains strikingly relevant. Is not true wisdom found in understanding that the fundamental laws of economics and the consequences of excessive indebtedness remain immutable, connecting the empires of the past to the present?
Perhaps in these echoes of history lies the compass to navigate the turbulent waters of our own fiscal future.
Enjoyed the video? Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next ones.